classes and as well Hispanic culture classes. Okay, and Paula, you wanna?
Yeah, I'm a teaching fellow at the University of Bristol in Spanish, and since the last year. And same thing, I coordinate some degrees and work with the year abroad, etc.
And more importantly, we are both members of the special interest group Decolonising Spanish language teaching in UK. So hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you Irene, thanks everyone for having us. And we're going to talk about decolonizing the Spanish language curriculum, reflections and pedagogical developments from the special interest group Decolonizing Spanish language teaching in UK. So today we'll share with you briefly the journey of the special interest group. We will explore the context that motivated its formation. We will delve into the complexities of defining decolonization, discuss our positionality, and we will share our first efforts along with the challenges that we face along the way. So over to you, Paula.
Yeah. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about the context and the origins and how our group started. So since 2010, successive transnational student movements, as you all know, have been demanding, among other goals, an end to institutionalized racism that persisted within our universities and other power centers, to denounce the historical consequences of colonization processes, and to overcome the Eurocentrism present in study programs, research methodologies, and in the very construction of knowledge. Some examples of these of the beginning of these reflections can be seen here on the screen, with documents such as Why My Curriculum is White by UCL, Goldsmith's Anti-Racist Action, and the Road Must Fall movement at the University of Oxford in 2020, among many others. Then in 2020, this movement to decolonize the university curricula gained momentum and was fueled by the Black Lives Matter protests and calls for racial justice. As you can see in the screen, also another moment that can come to our minds, and specifically us from Bristol, was the moment, the protest that led to the downing of the statue of Colston in Bristol. Before 2020, some universities had created spaces for decolonization, such as SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is a pioneer in this work. But after 2020, we would dare to say that all had curriculum decolonization programs. However, this movement had mainly impacted content modules and not languages. So in September 2020, the Association of University Language Communities, also known as AULC, began drafting a manifesto to bring curriculum decolonization to language teaching. This manifesto reached our association, LAUK, the Association for the Teaching of Spanish in Higher Education, in 2021 for consultation. So since that moment, our special interest group, which at that moment was not still a special interest group, began, our reflections started. It began with 18 members from our association, from 16 different university institutions, between language centers and departments of languages, with a wide range of experiences. The group is currently coordinated by two of our members, my colleague here, Macarena Jiménez from UCL, and our colleague Lourdes Hernández from LSE in London. We meet more or less every 6-7 weeks on a Friday at 6 p.m. So this shows our commitment. And in the last year, in 2023, that's when our group became finally a special interest group called DES-LAUK within our association. If you want to learn a bit more about what we have been doing in the past months and years, we have recently published a couple of articles that we leave there for you, and then if you are more interested, we can later provide you with the information.
Okay, and now we move to definition and positionality. So the term decolonization holds different meanings depending on the context. Generally, it refers to the political independence gained by territories after World War II. However, even though the formal political structures may have crumbled, the influence of colonial systems on knowledge, power, culture, known as coloniality of power, still persists. This concept, coloniality of power, emphasizes the enduring impact of colonialism. So decolonization is not just a political process, it's also an epistemological one. And this is where decolonizing the curriculum, including decolonizing the language, Spanish language teaching, becomes important. So following Shajahan's paper and other papers as well, and after long consideration, our group views the decolonization of the Spanish language teaching as a dynamic, ongoing process that involves critically examining teaching practices in order to decenter Western, Eurocentric, neoliberal, or white-body knowledge production modes that are presented as ahistorical and neutral. And finally, in order to integrate other perspectives, speakers, context, linguistic practice, especially those that have been silenced or excluded from the curriculum pedagogies. So these three moments can be considered as part of the same process, and these have been as well the stages that our group has followed when working on decolonization. Critically examining our teaching practice and all materials to decenter, and finally to integrate those speakers, those contexts that had been previously excluded from our language classes. But we recognize that our approach to decolonization is not the only one possible. In fact, we are aware that all the decolonization processes have begun in the States, quite different from ours, where Spanish has become a minority language, and also different from all the processes in Mexico, where indigenous languages play a leading role. Our definition of decolonization and consequently our decolonizing practices are shaped by our identities, who we are, and our context. As Mignolo and Walsh emphasize, decolonization is not an abstract process and cannot be defined in the abstract. It must be accompanied by four other questions, which you have on the screen: who is decolonizing, where is taking place, why is important, and how we're going to achieve that. So this idea invites us to talk about ourselves. Who are we? This special interest group is a group of 18 Spanish teachers, and defining the position of such a large group is not an easy task, starting with a selection of criteria to define it. So we have selected the following three criteria. Place of birth: 16 participants were born in Spain, 1 in Argentina, 1 in UK. Place of training: 16 participants were trained in Spain, 1 in Argentina, 1 in UK or Great Britain and Spain. Place of work: Spanish teachers at 16 British universities and 1 Spanish university. As well, we consider the Spanish language as a polycentric, polyphonic, and multifaceted language. And we regard Spanish as a language that was born and spread during colonial migratory journeys, becoming immersed in multilingual environments. And in its encounters with other language and with other speakers, Spanish language developed a range of dynamic relationships, including cooperation, enrichment, but also dominance, annihilation, appropriation. We've agreed on using the term context of use of Spanish or context of Spanish to refer to the geographies where the Spanish language is spoken. So the word context prevents us from using terms that might be problematic, such as Latin America, Hispanic communities, Spanish-speaking countries, and at the same time allows us to include also contexts where Spanish is not the official language, jure de facto, and to include as well migrant communities in that context of use of Spanish. But of course, we are aware of our limitation and biases. And therefore, we understand or work from a perspective of critical review and constant dialogue, both within and outside the group. And this is a meme in Spanish. We didn't have time to translate it. It just speaks how we might be contradicting the, I don't know, not following the...
So basically we are a decolonizing group that we're saying that it should include non-white, non-men, and no Spanish members, and that's us.
Yeah, that's precisely us. So, of course, this is our thoughts, this is our decolonization, and of course, there are biases.
And so now to finish with the presentation, I'm going to explain a little bit the resources that we have created throughout the last 3 years of the creation of our group, which are divided in three different sections. Okay, so materials, reflection document, and a platform to store resources. So especially in the second year of our work, and after 1 year exclusively dedicated to this reflection and analysis about ourselves and what we wanted to do, we started to create these 3 types of resources. So this way we established 3 working teams within the group, and each team had specific but interdependent functions. So although each team maintained its own organization with its own coordinator and held independent meetings, there were constant reflections and discussions between the whole special interest group. On the one hand, we had a group dedicated to what we call the Documento de Reflexión, or reflective document, which was a collaborative, in the beginning it was a collaborative document for internal use. That began to capture our own reflections. So we could say it was a live document, and it was subjected to constant review within the group, circulated and modified multiple times by our members, and receiving initially the designation of initial base. In this document, we discussed our positionality, explained recently by Macarena, and all the biases that arise from our positionality. Based on this document, one of the groups dedicated itself to creating a guide that we now call Documento de Reflexión, which is a document which is in constant review and update, and which allows us to reflect on our classes and our programs from a critical perspective. That is, it's kind of like a toolkit for teachers who want to modify their teaching practice or their programs, but might be somewhere lost on how or where to start. Obviously, we are not trying to give guidelines by any means, but recommendations based on our reflections and the dialogues we held over the last couple of years. This document is also aimed at higher education teachers in the UK, and we based it primarily on some of the models that you saw before on the screen. Yeah. Then the toolkit is in Spanish, and it's intended for Spanish who teaches Spanish, for teachers who teach Spanish, but of course it could be adapted. 3 areas can be distinguished, as you can see on the screen. The attitudes, that is related to identity, profile, awareness, mediation, knowledge and curricular content, which is the language, culture and society, and skills, which deals with pedagogy, material design and assessment. Another of our working groups is dedicated to managing and classifying content on what we call our DIGO platform. So DIGO is a platform that, as you can see on the image, allows us to create a repository of sources that serve as resources for reflection, generating debate on terminology, or for use when creating decolonizing materials. Over the past 2 years, we have a group of colleagues who have been dedicated to managing this platform and creating a series of guidelines on how to classify these documents and how to tag the different resources. And finally, we have the group dedicated to creating materials, in which our colleagues create teaching units from a decolonizing perspective. Over the last academic year, this group has undergone a process of reflection basically on what aspects a decolonized teaching unit should include. As you know, there are many themes that could be addressed in the classroom, such as language varieties, territories, speakers, as well as pedagogies. So after discussions with the groups, last year we developed our first teaching unit that you can see on the screen, together with a teacher's manual for B2 levels of students on Quan Su, who is a half Andalusian, half Chinese artist, who focuses on the Chinese diaspora in Spain. So for this sequence, we had a specific linguistics, didactic, and social justice objectives to facilitate the exploitation of the materials in the classroom. The activities created by the group were presented to other members of the SIG and of the special interest group. After several discussions and comments, we decided on to create our final product. Now we are in the process of creating a second teaching unit based on multilingualism in the Andes that is coming soon. And well, that's all.
Yeah, that's all. We have drafted some conclusions, but I think we can leave it here. So yeah. Thank you. Muy bien, has corrido